Hello and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering EDH deck tech. Today we are taking a look at Ashling Flame Dancer. But before we get into this video, I was so hyped about building a mono red Chandra Planeswalker focused deck. And while I was building the deck with the old Chandra from Magic Origins, I came along Ashling as I really disliked the original Chandra to be a good commander for this deck. And with Ashling I found a really powerful replacement that does a lot of work in this deck. So this is a Chandra focused deck, which uses Ashling for everything that mono red wants to do, and at some point burn our opponents out. So let's get into Ashling. It's a 4 mana 4/4 and you don't lose unspent red mana as steps and phases end. It has a Magecraft mechanic, so whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, discard a card, then draw a card. If this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, Ashling Flame Dancer deals 2 damage to each opponent and each creature they control, and if it's the third time, add 4 red mana. Due to the fact that we have built around a lot of Chandra Planeswalkers, we want to ramp in the early game, and aside from a few common mana rocks, we play the following cards. For example, Pyretic Ritual, a 2 mana instant, add 3 red mana to your mana pool, which can help us to hit a few of our more expensive mana rocks early on. We play Ruby Medallion, a 2 mana artifact, and red spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. One of the just called more expensive mana rocks is Scepter of Eternal Glory, a 4 mana legendary artifact, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, and you can also tap it to add 3 mana of any one color, activate only if you control 3 or more lands with the same name. We are a monocolor deck, so we play a bunch of normal mountains, so it will be easy for us to activate the second mana ability. We play Extraplanar Lens, a 3 mana artifact with imprint, so when it enters the battlefield you may exile target land you control, and whenever a land with the same name as the exiled card is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 mana of any type that land produced. This is the reason why we play snow-covered mountains in this deck, simply because this effect would also count for our opponent's normal mountains, and we would like to avoid giving our opponents extra mana. My favorite red mana rock is Glittering Stockpile, a 3 mana artifact treasure, and you can tap it to add 1 red mana and you put a stash counter on Glittering Stockpile. At some point you can tap it and sacrifice it to add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of stash counters on Glittering Stockpile. This mana rock helps us to work towards a very explosive turn when we can sacrifice it. We play Throne of Eldraine, a 5 mana legendary artifact, and as it enters the battlefield choose a color. We can tap it to add 4 mana of the chosen color, spend this mana only to cast monocolored spells of that color. Keep that in mind when you want to use that mana for artifacts, as that doesn't work, because you have to spend it on red colored spells. For 3 mana and tapping it, you can draw 2 cards, spend only mana of the chosen color to activate this ability. We gotta keep the board in check, and Ashling helps us with that with her second triggered ability, but we will also use a few Boardwipes that will help us along the way. So we play Anger of the Gods, a 3 mana sorcery, and it deals 3 damage to each creature, and if a creature dealt damage this way would die this turn, exile it instead. Keep in mind that if you chain it together correctly, you can use Ashling's second trigger to also deal 2 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. Ashling survives all of these 3 damage Boardwipes, which makes her the perfect commander for this monocolored deck. If we need a little bit more damage, we can also play Rolling Earthquake, a 1 red and X sorcery, and it deals X damage to each creature without horsemanship and each player. We play Sweltering Suns, a 3 mana sorcery, it deals 3 damage to each creature, and you can also cycle it for 3 mana. A really helpful board wipe and also a helpful enchantment is Spiteful Banditry, a 2 red and X enchantment, and when it enters the battlefield it deals X damage to each creature. Whenever 1 or more creatures your opponents control die, you create a treasure token. This ability triggers only once each turn. We play Into the Fire, a flexible spell, a 3 mana sorcery, choose 1. Either it deals 2 damage to each creature, planeswalker in battle, or you can put any number of cards from your hand on the bottom of your library and then draw that many cards plus 1. To be able to wipe the board at any time, we play Starstorm, a 2 red and X instant, and Starstorm deals X damage to each creature and you can cycle it for 3 mana. Once we kept the board in check, we can bring our Chandra Planeswalkers and from then on take over the game. So we play Chandra, Acolyte of Flame, a 3 mana 4 loyalty Planeswalker. Her 0 ability says put a loyalty counter on each red Planeswalker you control. Her other 0 ability says create 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens, they gain haste, sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. And her -2 ability says you may cast target instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard. If that card would be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. We play Chandra, Dressed to Kill, a 3 mana free loyalty planeswalker, and her first +1 mechanic says add 1 red mana and she deals 1 damage to up to 1 target player or planeswalker. Her other +1 mechanic says exile the top card of your library, if it's red you may cast it this turn, and her ultimate -7 says exile the top 5 cards of your library, you may cast red spells from among them this turn. You get an emblem with, whenever you cast a red spell, this emblem deals X damage to any target where X is the amount of mana spent to cast that spell. One of the most powerful Chandras in this deck is Chandra Hope's Beacon, a 6 mana 5 loyalty planeswalker, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy, and this ability triggers only once each turn. Remember that copying also matters for Ashling's Magecraft mechanic, to never miss out on the additional value that Ashling provides. Her +2 mechanic says add 2 mana in any combination of colors. Her +1 mechanic says exile the top 5 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may cast an instant or sorcery spell from among those exiled cards. And her -X mechanic says Chandra Hope's Beacon deals X damage to each up to 2 targets. We play Chandra Flameshaper, a 7 mana 6 loyalty planeswalker, and her +2 mechanic says add 3 red mana. Exile the top 3 cards of your library, choose 1, you may play that card this turn. Her +1 mechanic says create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it has haste, and at the beginning of the next end step, sacrifice this token. And her -4 ability says Chandra deals 8 damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers. Probably the most powerful Chandra planeswalker is Chandra Torch of Defiance, a 4 mana 4 loyalty planeswalker, and one of her plus mechanics says exile the top card of your library, you may cast that card. If you don't, Chandra Torch of Defiance deals 2 damage to each opponent. Her other +1 mechanic says add 2 red mana to your mana pool. Her -3 mechanic says Chandra Torch of Defiance deals 4 damage to target creature, and her -7 mechanic says you get an emblem with whenever you cast a spell, this emblem deals 5 damage to any target. And my personal favorite Chandra planeswalker is Chandra Awakened Inferno, a 6 mana 6 loyalty planeswalker, and this spell can't be countered. Her +2 mechanic is one of your win cons, as it says each opponent gets an emblem with at the beginning of your upkeep this emblem deals 1 damage to you. Her -3 mechanic says Chandra Awakened Inferno deals 3 damage to each non-elemental creature, which is really good for Ashling as it is an elemental, and her -X mechanic says Chandra Awakened Inferno deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker. If a permanent dealt damage this way would die this turn, exile it instead. Along the way of all of these powerful planeswalkers that either generate us more mana, can either wipe the board or impulse us for more cards to keep chaining spells together, we play a lot of supportive pieces that help our planeswalkers. Like the Chain Veil, a 4 mana legendary artifact. At the beginning of your end step, if you didn't activate a loyalty ability of a planeswalker this turn, you lose to life. For 4 mana and tapping it, it also has a very powerful activated ability, because for each planeswalker you control, you may activate one of its loyalty abilities once this turn, as though none of its loyalty abilities have been activated this turn. To keep copying those activated abilities, we play Rings of Brighthearth, a 3 mana artifact, and whenever you activate an ability, if it isn't a mana ability, you may pay 2 mana. If you do copy that ability, you may choose new targets for the copy. To use our Chandra ultimate abilities immediately, we play Etheric Amplifier, a 3 mana artifact, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. For 4 mana and tapping it, choose 1, activate only as a sorcery. Either you double the number of each kind of counters on target permanent, which can be loyalty counters on your planeswalkers, or you double the number of each kind of counters you have. We will always go for the first line, as we want to double loyalty counters and then ultimate our Chandra planeswalkers. And last but not least, we play Chandra's Regulator, a 2 mana legendary artifact, and whenever you activate a loyalty ability of a Chandra planeswalker, you may pay 1 mana. If you do, copy that ability and you may choose new targets for the copy. It also has another activated ability for 1 mana and tapping it and discarding a mountain card or a red card, you draw a card. Aside from playing our Chandra planeswalkers that either generate a bunch of additional value, mana or damage, we will need a few more additional burn spells to win the game. So we play Delayed Blast Fireball, a 3 mana instant. Delayed Blast Fireball deals 2 damage to each opponent and each creature they control, and if the spell was cast from exile, it deals 5 damage to each opponent and each creature they control instead. You can also foretell this card for 2 mana, and in a later turn you can fire it off for 6 mana, so you got that impulse trigger to deal even more damage. We play Pyromancer's Gorgles, a really cool flavor artifact, because for 5 mana you get a legendary artifact, and you can tap it to add 1 red mana. When that mana is spent to cast a red instant or sorcery spell, copy that spell and you may choose new targets for the copy. Remember that copying also triggers Magecraft, so you will get another additional value trigger out of Ashling. We play Fanatic of Mogis, a 4 mana for 2, and when it enters the battlefield it deals damage to each opponent equal to your devotion addition to red. In one of our storm turns we want to commit a bunch of powerful planeswalkers onto the battlefield that also have several red pips, so that Fanatic of Mogres can deal a bunch of damage. We play Repercussion, a 3-mana enchantment, and whenever a creature is dealt damage, Repercussion deals that much damage to that creature's controller, which can definitely be a win con because we play a bunch of Boardwipes and damage spells, and as our planeswalkers also have damage abilities. One of our win cons is a land, Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle, a land that enters the battlefield tapped, and whenever a mountain enters the battlefield under your control, if you control at least 5 other mountains, you may have Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle, deal 3 damage to target creature or player. It can also be tapped to add 1 red mana to your mana pool. Another win con of ours is Price of Progress, a 2-mana instant. It deals damage to each player equal to twice the number of non-basic lands that player controls. We got a few non-basic lands in our deck, yes that's correct, but as we are a mono red deck, most of our lands are still Nomad Mountains, so we should be in the clear to fire this one off at some point. You want to win more? You get it. We are a mono-colored deck, so we are allowed to do everything to win the game. So we play Blood Moon, a 3-mana enchantment, and non-basic lands are mountains. One of my favorite creatures in this deck is Jaya's Phoenix, a 5-mana 3/3 with flying and haste, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, copy the next loyalty ability you activate this turn. When you activate it, you may choose new targets for the copy, and whenever you cast a planeswalker spell, you may return Jaya's Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield. Especially in this deck, this creature can come back over and over again, and can provide us with a lot of additional value from our planeswalkers. We play Silent Arbiter, a 4-mana 1/5, and no more than 1 creature can attack each combat. And no more than 1 creature can block each combat. We play a bunch of planeswalkers and we gotta protect them, so Silent Arbiter keeps the remaining creatures of our opponents in check if our Boardwipes aren't strong enough to finish them off. To keep our planeswalkers even more protected, we play Maze of Ith, a land that you can tap, so untap target attacking creature. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to you and dealt by that creature this turn. Of course this land doesn't produce any mana for us, so we gotta watch out when we play it, but if we got it on board and maybe also a Silent Arbiter and a few of our planeswalkers, we should be in the clear to keep our planeswalkers safe. Alright guys, these were a few cards that I would play in my Ashling, Flame Dancer, Chandra tribal deck. Let me know which cards you would add to the deck, which legendary creature I shall feature next. Make sure to check out my full deck list in the notes below, and then I would say see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.